Now, I see a tiny issue in our design here. In the constructor of vehicle form component, we have two dependencies. And each of these dependencies is a class with only one method, getMakes or getFeatures. Now, potentially, as we extend this application and add more fields to our vehicle form, chances are we may need more services to get the data to populate this form. And more services means more dependencies here. Ideally, we should not have more than 4 or 5 dependencies in the constructor of a class, because that makes it harder to unit test that class. Now, if you have never done unit testing before, don't worry, it's not the focus of this course. But what I want you to know is that when we unit test a class, we test it in isolation. So we don't want to give a real service implementation, because during unit testing, that service is going to make calls to the backend. And we don't want to call backend services while unit testing a class in isolation. So ideally, we should keep the number of dependencies in a class to less than 3. Of course, this is not a hard and fast rule, and sometimes we may have to break the rules. But in this application, the fact that we have 2 services and each of them has only one method makes me think this design is a little bit too fine-grained. So I would like to merge these 2 services into one service called vehicle service. This class is going to have 2 methods, getMakes and getFeatures. And in the future, if we need other API endpoints to supply data to populate this form, we can add additional methods in this class. So with this refactoring, we reduce the number of dependencies of this class. Now here we have John Smith. He's a new member in our team, and he's a fairly opinionated developer. So he disagrees with what I'm saying here. And he argues that, yes, currently we have only one method in, let's say, feature service. But in the future, we're going to have more methods in this class. We're going to have methods for adding a feature, updating a feature, and deleting a feature. The same goes for the make service. What do you think? Is he right or wrong? Well, it's not a matter of one being right or wrong. It all depends on the context. In this application, we're dealing with vehicles, makes, and features. Makes are reasonably static. We don't constantly get new makes in the industry. We have BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and so on. Of course, their models can change, but the makes themselves, they don't change that often. Same goes for the standard features that are available in different vehicles. Again, this is a fairly static list. It's not something that changes every day or every week. So yes, we can go ahead and implement an administration panel so we can add, update, and delete makes and features. But that would require extra work, and it's going to increase the costs and risks of producing the software. So our focus here should be to deliver this application according to the requirements. We shouldn't add to the requirements. The Vega company has not asked us to build an administration panel for makes and features. This is something that John Smith is proposing. And of course, the business may get excited about it at first, but they don't realize that this is going to add extra complexity to the application. It's going to increase the costs and the risks. Because as we get closer to the deadline, both the business and the developers get more anxious about releasing the software. So instead of attempting to build an application with all kinds of fancy features, focus on the core features that add value to the business. So in this context, I prefer that we don't assume that we're going to build an administration panel unless we are asked to do so. So we want to stick to the simplest solution to solve the problem explained in the requirements document. Given the scope of our application, I believe that this make service and feature service are too fine-grained, and I would rather to merge them into one vehicle service. So let's go to the make service. We can rename this class by pressing F2. I'm going to change this to vehicle service. Now note that with this way of renaming a class, all its references are updated automatically. So in app module, in the provider section, make service is renamed to vehicle service. And also in our vehicle component in the constructor, now we have vehicle service. So make sure to rename classes using F2. Now here in vehicle form component, I also want to rename this field. Once again, F2, vehicle service. Then I'm going to get rid of the second parameter. Now, instead of calling feature service, I'm going to call vehicle service to get the features. And now we need to go to feature service and cut this method here and move it to vehicle service. So get features and get makes. Next, in app module, I'm going to delete feature service here and also delete the corresponding import statement. Okay. Next, I'm going to delete this file here and rename make service to vehicle service. Now, if you go to app module, you can see the path to our module is broken, so we need to fix this here, vehicle.service. And one more time, in vehicle form component, we delete feature service and change the path to vehicle service. Let's test the application. So we've got our makes, models, and features. Beautiful.